Bonjour à tous. Hi, everyone. And welcome everyone to our virtual conference presented by Nourish Food Marketing on this topic, packaging for the new consumer, how to win in a 5-second shopper attention span. How do you grab the shopper's attention as well as their dollars and hearts in any increasingly cluttered store and online environment? What are some future trends in packaging that you need to be on top of now? Design, substrates, technology integration. How can you ensure your packaging is working as hard as it could be? Those are those questions that Joanne MacArthur, president of Nourish Food Marketing, will try to answer today. Joanne has spent a large part of her career building brands with consumers and retailers at Molson, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, and Cadillac Fairview. As a divisional president of Molson Coors and a member of its North American management board, Joanne led the charge to sell more beers more profitably. As a founding partner and president of Nourish Food Marketing, Joanne now builds powerful brands for food and beverage products in Canada, the US, and Europe, creating marketing strategies that help move products off the shelves into the consumer's shopping basket, onto their plates, and into their hearts. Joanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, even if it is virtually. SIAL is always my favorite show every year, even if it's not my Waistline's favorite. Show. So I'm missing all those great conversations and, all the great products and that I get to encounter. But this is a good way of doing things as well during this time. So thank you for joining me as well. So let me just figure out okay, here we go. So just a quick thing about Nourish. I like to say we know a lot about a little. So don't ask us to sell banking or insurance. We focus solely on food and beverage. And we work across the entire food ecosystem, which is kind of fun. So we work with primary producers in agriculture, processors, manufacturers, food service, retailers, and associations. So I think having the privilege of working across the whole food ecosystem gives us a really interesting window into the world. And we've been at this for, well, you can see 12 years. We are a full service agency. We just happen to also have people who are experts in food and beverage, and that includes on the packaging side. We have a test kitchen. We have food stylists, you name it. And I'm presenting from our office in Toronto today, and there's a shoot going on downstairs and lots of yummy smells. So I can feel like I'm at SIAL. As I said, we're basically a full service ad agency, again, just specializing in food and beverage. So I'm going to talk to you today about packaging. And, it's a big job. If you look at everything that a package has to do, it needs to protect primarily, but it also needs to grab your attention. It needs to communicate in both official languages in Canada. And then there's all those legal requirements. So, I'm a research geek at heart. So everything I'm going to talk to you about is grounded in behavioral science. And I've read deeply on this and done lots of research in the area. So the other thing is, consumers want to own what's in that package, but they don't actually want to own the packaging. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some trends in that area after I go through our approach to packaging. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're designing food packaging that sells. Pretty doesn't necessarily sell. And I can't tell you the number of times we have, especially new entrepreneurs that have put their heart and soul and their second mortgage into a great idea for a food product. They get it listed, and then it just sits on shelf. And we often see them a year into that process, and they're saying, why is it not selling? And I can tell you, I look at the packaging and I'll say, you have a friend or somebody in the family who's a graphic designer. And they've designed pretty packaging. It's not the same as being a food designer because it's very different communicating from a shelf, whether that's an online shelf or an at retail shelf. So you can see, I'm going to take you through a snapshot of our process. And these are the things that we follow and we believe in when we design that food packaging. It doesn't start with the design. You have to back way back. That's the expression. But first you have to establish the truth of that brand. And then it's the manifestation of that. It also needs to make sure that it communicates clearly, and I'm going to talk about that. And that means different things to different people. And it also has to be insight driven, right? It's and you also have to test it with consumers. A lot of times we get in our own ivory tower, or we get so close to a project that you kind of need those beginner eyes to step back and say, is this really saying what I think it's saying to people? So it's really that insight up front that differentiates, and it builds, supports those brand foundations, and it maximizes something that we talk about with shelf impact, stoppability. And when I talk about stoppability, it's about following some rules and deciding what one rule you're actually going to break to pop out of that landscape. Otherwise, you're just going to blend in. You also have to make sure that you optimize shoppability, and I'll talk about that a little more in depth as well. What is the shorthand that consumers are using when they're actually navigating that grocery store and that section? So, first it's understanding human behavior, and we are wired to hunt and gather. And what does that mean? Well, we know from Popeye research that a lot of decisions, the majority of decisions are actually made in store. And if you think about all the clutter when you're walking down an aisle, how do consumers select that product? If we didn't have shorthand and cues, it would take us hours to get through a grocery store, and yet we navigated on average in about 30 minutes. So how do we do that? Well, the way we do it is we scan in kind of 4-foot fields of vision, and we're looking for a visual clue. And usually that visual clue is what I call a signpost brand, and everything else follows from that. There's this whole theory of visual clues that I think it's Dr. Hugh Phillips. If you want to learn more, he's written a lot of books and teaches, I believe, in Montreal on this subject. So really fascinating stuff. But we can only manage sort of 4 feet at a time. So we're just quickly scanning. And as we're scanning, we're actually deselecting products as we're looking for that one product that we want. And so for instance here, if I was shopping beverage, what is the signpost brand in soda, right? Arguably, it's that iconic red labeled Coca-Cola with that beautiful bottle shape. And so once consumers get that, that's their signpost, and then they work off of that. So again, you need to make that that personal connection and work off of that. And as I said, there's over 50,000 SKUs, stock keeping units. That's not even the number of products on the shelf, but that's distinct brand stock keeping units. And so how do they get through that? And you have to think about all the other stimuli that they're encountering as well as they're going through that. They're pushing a cart. Quite often, we have our cell phones that we're looking down at that has our grocery list. We have screaming kids. There's music in the background. So it's quite a feat to be able to go there and purchase things. And so there's this whole, through this bombardment of sensory things, we're deselecting things as well. And another just watch out with this is make sure that you're always applying a multicultural lens. As we know, Canada, especially Toronto, where more than 50% of people are born from outside Canada, and you can't assume that everything communicates in the same way. So for instance, you know, like look at even the stop signs. Stop signs aren't universal. So make sure that you're doing a check-in there as well to make sure that your packaging isn't communicating something that's actually quite offensive to another group. So when I was introduced, thank you, it was mentioned that I started my career at Procter & Gamble, and I'm not going to tell you how many years ago. And they came up with a term called the first moment of truth. And that's something that we always work towards. And that is the first moment of truth is how does that package work and communicate on shelf? And you know, it's a concept that's been with us since the beginning of time. I said we're hunter and gatherers by nature. And as part of that, our eyesight's always cued into those red berries, right? That bright red. There's a reason why that works so well, because that was where the nutrient-rich food was. So we tend to have a natural preference for those kind of colors and very vibrant, vibrant shades as well. And it allows things to break through the consumer field of vision. But when we look at that first moment of truth, we want to make sure that you're standing out versus the competition. It's communicating the truth about you, what's best about your brand. And it also needs to communicate rational as well as emotional needs, because we are wired for emotion first and we follow that up with the rational. We connect through emotion. So you want to make sure that your packaging is what we call cart stopping, shopping worthy. Then there's the second moment of truth. Because if you think about it, you sell once in store, but you need to sell through twice, whether it's getting the consumer to take that product out of the fridge, the freezer, the pantry, and actually use it up so that they need to reorder it, right? That's the second moment of truth. So when I open up that pantry, that product's in competition with all the other products that could fill the same need. So you want to make sure that it looks good in that way as well, that it fits in with the consumer values, and you know, you would feel good about serving it to your family. And of course, these days, there's something called the zero moment of truth. And this is a term that was coined by Google. I think you can download a book all about the free book online about the zero moment of truth. But that's basically, most of us encounter brands now online before we ever see them in store. And that's becoming more and more true during the pandemic as more grocery shopping is moving online. So you want to make sure that you're winning that moment of truth as well. How does it look on the digital shelf? And I'm going to talk at the end a little on some ideas about how you can connect the online and the offline world with packaging to really win there. But first, I'm just going to take you through the steps that we do when we design packaging. And I'm actually going to use a real life example. One of our budding entrepreneurs who was planning to launch at SIAL this year. So unfortunately, you're not going to get to try Graffiti Alley Ice Cream's amazing super premium ice cream. But I am going to talk to you about it. And so when Prashant came to us about this, it was, you know, he loved ice cream, but he looked at all the better for you ice creams out there, and they were really sacrificing things. They were sacrificing that super premium fat content. And we know that we've moved to a time where fat's no longer bad, right? And it gives you that wonderful mouthfeel. It tended to be high in sugar, so it wasn't a better for you product. So he came up with a really wonderful recipe, working with the University of Guelph, to come up with a super premium ice cream called Graffiti Alley. That had no added sugars, it had all natural, and he designed it for a single serve packaging size that was portion controlled with the spoon in the top, and also really having inspirational and authentic flavors that were inspired by culinary traditions around the world in a way that was appreciative rather than appropriating it. So I'm going to talk you through the process and where we got with Graffiti Alley ice cream, and hopefully you will see it on a shelf near you soon. So the first thing we always do is we have a kickoff exercise, and that we call our senses exercise. And it's a way of going through and deciding, what are you really selling? So when I say, what are you really selling? We always use the example of Volvo because everybody understands that. If I say Volvo doesn't really sell cars, they sell, and I know you're all in your head saying safety. Yes. So we always try to figure out what is it that the brand is really selling, as well as who is the consumer firing if they're hiring you. So when we went through this with Graffiti Alley, we decided that what they're really selling is awakening. That's sort of their word. And you'll never see this word expressed on the packaging anywhere. It's really kind of a beacon word for us as we go through the design process. So the whole concept of awakening to new global flavors, to a new you who was enjoying life, was enjoying a super premium product without feeling guilty, and was also being mindful of what they were putting into their bodies. So after that, we then go into the brand archetype. And brand archetypes, most of you, I imagine, if you're in this area, are aware of them. It was something that Carl Jung, the psychologist, came up with. And he said that there is basically, you can use these symbols to characterize complex concepts. And there's basically 12 archetypes. And what we've done is we've taken them and adapted them for food and beverage brands. So it's a little easier to understand. So when we went through that, we decided that Graffiti Alley is a rebel brand. And, rebel obviously promises revolution. They don't stick to industry conventions. They, have new attitudes, and, they want you to be a bit of a game changer. So that helps us understand how to express it. So then the next thing we do is we go and we visit existing shelf sets where we think this product first is going to be sold. And, as I said, we need to understand the visual language of the category, what those signpost brands are, what are the conventions we're going to follow, what ones are we going to break as well. So we take lots of pictures. And then I want to give a shout out to a new tool that we've started using. It's called Shelfgram. You can learn more about it at shelfgram.com. But what it allows us to do is you can actually go through and filter and see shelf sets around the world for different categories. So you can get inspiration from other categories, other countries, and you can also just see what's going on in terms of the ice cream world. So we always make sure that we do that as part of our scan as well. We also took a look at the Walmart shelf set, because even though we think go to market, it will start in more of those specialty stores. We know that Walmart actually has a really good mix of high and low. So you want to make sure it works there as well. Next thing we move to is a mood board. And that allows everybody to kind of agree on a direction, a feel in terms of a color wheel before too much time is actually invested in terms of packaging and the actual branding. So this is kind of where we ended up. And then we come up with the graphic language and come up with some mood boards that show packaging direction. And, we looked at, I think coming out of this, the idea was to take, okay, we liked, this was number 3 on the top, number 4, combine a couple of elements, and that's kind of where we ended up. So that's at the start of the packaging process. And then at the end of the packaging process, of course, we have the brand guide, which is really the do's, don'ts, and it's what you can give to other people as they're designing other elements for you. So you make sure that you're staying true to what the brand is about. And so then with all of that, we came to this final mood board before moving into packaging. And then this is what you would have been seeing at SIAL. Wonderful call outs in terms of names, and really you can just kind of feel that super premiumness on your tongue when you look at that. But we always say you need to look at packaging in context or in situ, right? And so it's pretty easy in today's world with digital tools to actually put it in there and make sure that it actually is working well. So that's a little bit about Graffiti Alley. Now I'm just going to switch gears and talk a little bit about packaging trends and moving beyond the actual physical package. Now that you understand kind of our process, you know, when you look at our senses, it's estimated that, you know, between 80 and 90% of the information that we receive actually comes through our eyes. You know, they say, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's absolutely true. And it's the way that we're able to absorb information the fastest, right? And you've probably heard about cognitive load, the fact that, you know, we can only handle so many choices and then we basically shut down. I'll give a shout out to Dr. Barry Schwartz, who's done a lot of great research and has a great book there in terms of the paradox of choice. If you give a consumer too many choices, they actually will end up leaving a category and not purchasing. You know, we've got all sorts of great tools now that we live in a digital age that allows us to connect with the virtual world. So I want to show you a couple of examples that I think are really clever. So first, this is an Irish crisp or potato chip company, the Kehoe brothers. They are a family of potato farmers in Ireland, and they got into added value processing. So they came up with potato chips. And when you buy that pack, on the back is something called Spud Nav. So you are able to type this into a browser and it will immediately take you to a picture of that field where the potatoes that are in the potato chips in that bag came from. So do you think that those potato chips are going to taste more premium, fresher, better? You bet. So, you know, I think this is just a real clever way of connecting. We do a lot of work with agricultural clients as well. And we know, you know, we always counsel them about radical transparency. The consumer wants to know more. They want to, we call it made matters. They want to understand every step of the process. So you really need to invite them in and give them as much information as you can. And ideally, you do it by showing rather than telling, because we trust what we see more than what we hear or read. Another example I want to give you is a US egg farmer, Vital Farms. So you can actually, they have a QR code and it will instantly take you to online, and you can see the hen and the farm where those eggs came from. And so you see that happy hen walking around and these great conditions. And again, that egg, you're going to feel better about it, and it's going to seem fresher as well. So I think these are some great ideas. So a couple of final thoughts, and then I'm going to talk about some future trends in packaging quickly, and then hopefully we can get to just checking my time. Yeah, we're good. We'll get to some questions. I always love that. So in terms of things to think about, keep it simple and easy to understand. Those of us in the business, we have to remember how many people English is a second language, whether that's English or French. We also have to remember literacy levels. So, you know, you really want to make sure that you're working towards sort of a grade 6 literacy level. If you look at even the Globe and Mail, they are trying to cue in to a grade 6 level. I work on the board of a literacy organization, so it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So we always say you want to be clear, not clever. The other thing, you want to make sure that things are legible as well. You know, a lot of times designers want to use really fun, ornate fonts, but you have to remember, you know, you've got 2 seconds to grab people and they're not going to do the work. You need to do the work for them. So you need to make sure those core messages are coming through. And you need to make sure that it's big enough that people like me, a boomer, can read. So please distance test. I can't tell you the number of times I have yelled, especially during the pandemic when I can't read things and I can't actually pick that packaging up and look at it right now. So if I can't read from a distance, I am not going to discover your brand. So make sure you're distance testing it, not with your 30-year-old designers, but with who's a boomer and isn't going to be picking things up off the shelf. Also, if you are designing for the freezer, remember you've got that extra set, that extra glass in between you and the shopper as they're going by. So you have to pop even more than on a traditional shelf. You want to make sure it's social design by design. Make sure it's earn-centric, like acknowledge that digital world and try to connect. If you're on Instagram, if you have a newsletter, if you can invite consumers in some way to where the product came from, do it and make sure it's part of your packaging. And of course, you don't want to forget the romance. You want to make sure that you're getting that emotional response. So like you saw with Graffiti Alley, it wasn't just vanilla, it was Madagascar bourbon vanilla. It wasn't just salt, it was Himalayan pink salt. So I've often had people come and they don't describe their ingredients in the way that they should, you know. So really go down and understand the origin of some of those ingredients, because you can call that out in a way that romances it and really elevates the entire brand. So just a quick checklist for success. You know, we've taken you through all the things that packaging has to do, and it's, you know, I showed that slide at the start. You know, you're really balancing all these different priorities. So you want to make sure that you have a checklist at the end, and you're going back to it and making sure, you know, that the product does have shoppability, it does have stoppability, that you're clearly communicating what's best about you, what's your point of difference, and is it on that front panel? Because consumers aren't going to take the time to read and turn over that pack. Does it work across different cultures? Make sure you're testing it not just within your own little social bubble. Does it win at those 3 different moments of truth? All right, the first moment of truth, the second moment of truth, the 0 moment of truth. Does it strike an emotional chord? And finally, have you distance tested it? So I'm just going to use the last couple of minutes to talk about a couple of things related to packaging that came out of our trend report, our 2020 trend report. We do a trend report annually because we specialize and we work solely in food and beverage. We've got access to lots of information, lots of research. And so every year in November, we come out with a trend report. And one of the trends that we had for this year, remember it was November, was Unpackage Me. And it was all about the move away from single-use plastics and into solutions beyond just recycling, because I think there is an acknowledgement that recycling doesn't actually work. You need to stop it at the source, because a lot of the recycling, there are confusing rules, things end up in landfill. We can't just ship it offshore like we used to. So of course, you know, single-use plastics during the pandemic are up as safety first. But there are some interesting things happening out there. And I really do think when we're trying to attack this, we're going to attack it successfully as an industry. We're going to have to cooperate. You know, we started to see that happening with coffee cups before the pandemic, with refillable coffee cups. That's been put on hold as safety protocols are being put in place. But I wanted to shout out a few things that I thought were kind of interesting. You know, we're seeing edible packaging made out of seaweed, the Glenlivet. I think that's, you know, a little faddish rather than a trend. But then you see Nature Knows, which I believe actually won a SIAL award, if I'm not mistaken. It's a compostable bag. I think it's made out of corn. And the nice thing about this is we move from packaging into less packaging. We still need some way of communicating to consumers what's best about that brand and what it is about. So you know, the challenge is to communicate with less packaging, and I think you know, what Nature Knows has done here is a great way of doing that, and it also extends the shelf life as well. So that's another great way. We also know during the pandemic, we are all creating a lot more waste, not just single-use plastics, but also all those Amazon deliveries and cardboard. I can see that just walking up and down my street on garbage day. It's the bins that used to contain everything are now overflowing. So there's this whole consumer guilt offset, and we really do think that there is going to be a refocus as we come out of COVID. Once we've tackled this as a society, everybody's on the same issue on this one. Wherever you are in the world, we're aligned beating COVID. So the next thing could be the environment and make positive change there. So you know, those bring your own container, things that were going on beforehand, yes. But we're also seeing interesting things in Europe. Coca-Cola getting rid of some of the plastic there. Diageo just came out with a really interesting, that's the paper bottle you can see on the left. It's a pilot light technology, and Unilever and Pepsi are also looking at that. And then I also want to mention, if you haven't heard about it, it should be on your radar, Loop packaging. And Loop is all about looking at packaging as an asset rather than a cost. And Xavier mentioned that I used to work for Molson, and Molson did kind of a version of this, or the beer industry, with the industry standard bottle. So there was a bottle that people had, and it was recycled a number of times. Well, Loop is actually taking that one step further now. And you know, you can see Häagen-Dazs. You are actually now investing in packaging that is returned to the store. They collect it, they clean it, and then it goes back to the factory to refill. And so when you start looking at the cost of that single-use packaging, and if you can now use it, say an average of 15 times, how much more money could you put into that and make it look even more super premium? That's an absolute brilliant packaging that Häagen-Dazs has done. It has more functionality in terms of keeping the product at a better temperature. And you're also able to invest more in terms of substrates and graphics as well. And so that's it for my formal presentation. If you want to stay connected, there's my LinkedIn, there's my email, good old QR code, punch that and you will be directed to our sign up for our newsletter. And you can also download our 2020 trend report and sign up for our 2021 trend report, which will be coming out in a couple of months.
Great, thank you, Joanne. That was very, very useful. And still, for the audience, if you have some questions, please put your question in the chat, and I will be happy to ask the question, ask Joanne the question. And I think a lot of congratulations. Thanks for these great tips, a great, easy to guess presentation. Gears to the 4 types of learners, excellent presentation. So good job, Joanne. I mean, that's a successful one for a virtual conference. I mean, that's not that easy to be alone in front of a screen.
No, it's not. Not seeing the audience is hard. You don't, you don't see if you're connecting.
Exactly.
Or, yes.
I have a question. What is the investment infrastructure required to go beyond the shelf?
Great question. You know, it doesn't need to be that much. Everybody has a website. Most people have social channels that they're using as well. So it's just making that connection. There's a reason I have a QR code at the last slide as well. It's funny because a lot of QR codes look like the next big thing, and then they kind of died off, if you remember. But now, every one of these has a built-in QR code reader. You don't have to download anymore. You just take a picture. Anybody who's been in a restaurant recently, right? You're not handed a menu anymore. There's usually a QR code on the table that you just put your phone over and it opens onto the menu. So even a simple QR code on packaging is a really easy way to direct people to your website where you can go deeper into the origin of your product or tell more. And it allows you to just communicate more. So it can be that simple. It can be as far removed as, you know, what Vital Farms does, allowing you to actually see the farms in action. And there, you know, you've got some 360 photography, but, you know, it doesn't have to be a crazy amount. You can really, it's just allows you to go a little bit deeper with the consumer and tell and hopefully show your story a little bit more. It can even go to product usage ideas and recipes, right? If you have recipes on your website, suggested uses, you know, again, it's not something you can get on your packaging, but again, having a QR code is an easy way to instantly connect consumers there and provide some inspiration.
Good. I remember once at a conference we had some kind of YouTuber, very famous, and he has launched some cocktail beach something. I don't remember exactly the name, but he made zero investment on the communication. The packaging was great. There was some kind of a alcoholic juice or whatever, and he used actually his network just to sell the product, and it goes very well actually. That's some, you know, you don't need necessarily to go to the regular channels to be successful.
No, especially now with consumers ordering online, and being able to order from social, you know, channels as well, right? You can actually purchase product through Facebook, through Instagram. It's quite easy now to do that. And, you know, that's part of what we say, make sure that your packaging is social by design and earn centric. And by earn centric, we mean exactly what you're saying, Xavier, that whole idea of people sharing and taking the picture on Instagram, and it goes viral because it's so beautiful.
Yes, exactly. Another, I have two questions for you. Which social channels are you encouraging food brands to use these days?
Well, it depends who you're selling to. You know, Instagram is probably the primary these days. You know, it's been called Foodagram for a reason. And, you know, we eat and drink with our eyes, so it's a wonderful visual. You know, Facebook is still great for community building, so we still do something there. Twitter, we look at more for pushing information out, so less so for consumers, more for professionals. And yeah, playing with TikTok, absolutely. Younger demographic, of course, but you know, that's probably the future. Every generation has their own tool, right? So, you know, the kids that were on Facebook, once they got of a certain age and their parents were also there, then and boomers adopted Facebook, they moved to Instagram, and now they're moving to TikTok. Yeah, and you know, YouTube's is a great channel as well. You know, you want to make sure that you have content there, because you know, what's the #1 search query on Instagram is how to, and consumers are doing a lot of how to right now as they are cooking from scratch in the pandemic, and using food and beverage products in a way that they never have in the past.
Good.
And you know what, I'm just gonna, one other thing is we are also big believers in newsletters. So it's not necessarily a social tool, but we do email and build databases for some of our clients around newsletters. And we've got some communities that are over, you know, 200,000 people who are interested in what this brand has to say, the recipes that they're sharing. And the lovely thing about newsletters is that database that you've built, you own that customer relationship, you own that tool. Whereas Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, they change the rules often. And, you know, as they say, don't build your house on rented land. So we're still big believers in having the social presence, but at the end of the day, you want to own that customer relationship. And so we're still big believers for certain products in that monthly newsletter.
Good. I have another question. Do you have example of reusable packaging for other food categories other than beverages?
Well, that Häagen-Dazs, all the Loop products, if you go on to just Google Loop, you'll see that that's all reusable. So that's happening. It's not necessarily, there was just a new packaging that came out for cucumbers the other day that replaces the plastic. You know, there's some sugarcane compostable packaging that's showing up for food products as well. So it's a byproduct of the sugarcane, and it's 100% compostable. And by compostable, I mean it actually does break down in months, not years. So it's legitimate, but it also allows, a lot of restaurants are starting to move to that for their food products as well because of all the single-use plastic and foam that's coming out of this pandemic. So lots of great packaging there as well, but I would say we are still very much early stages of this. And, you know, as you know, there's big investments, so quite often it's going to be a company like Pilot Light that develops and does the capital investment and the R&D and can sell it across industries and across companies because, you know, for one brand to create this on their own, it's pretty formidable.
Okay, good. And actually, another question from the same person: how does it work with the retailers with those kind of packaging?
Oh, well, it's a hot button with retailers right now, I can tell you. We've got another product in-house that has an environmental message. And, you know, you look at the Walmarts of the world, you look at the Sobeys, they're all talking about that in their CSR. So it's a hot button for retailers if you can eliminate packaging because they know that's what consumers want. Unfortunately, some of this stuff has taken a bit of a it's you know, holding pattern right now during the pandemic because grocery has been focusing on just getting the product on shelf and making sure that they have enough because, you know, we saw a huge shift in share of stomach from food service into grocery. So they're selling a lot more. So Loblaws was supposed to have launched the Loop program. And I have not seen it in store yet. So I think that that's probably taken a bit of a, it may be delayed for another quarter, but Loblaws has been planning and had announced that they were going to be doing Loop. Sorry about that. That they were going to be doing that across a number of categories. So again, look up a Loop. I think it's just loop.com and you'll see all the different products and categories. And, you know, Loblaws had it all set up and it's very safe and sterile. So, you know, workers don't have to handle things. It just goes into a bin. They pick it up, Loop picks it up, takes it to their central facility. It gets sterilized and then it gets taken back to the manufacturer's facility for reuse.
Good. Just would like to highlight to our audience that packaging is so big that we have actually 2 awards winner in the SIAL innovation on 5 awards. So I invite everybody to look at it because they have such a great solutions for the 2 winners proposed. I don't see any other questions. So Joanne, there was another question. May you provide the website? But sorry, what you have just said, the loop.com.
Loop, I think it's loop.com. But just Google Loop packaging and it'll come up if that's not it.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Once again, this video is will be seen on our YouTube channel within 1 hour and a half and 2 hours, and also in the replay conferences section in the menu of our virtual show. I would like to thank you again, Joanne, for this marvelous presentation and a lot of things, a lot of insight that I've learned myself. Thanks everyone for your times. Thank you for your support. And have a great virtual visit. There is only 2 days, 1 day and a half left now, and we will be good to go for 2021. Thank you.
Merci, bonne chance. Bye-bye.